10 by 18s. So I really wanted to explore scale and color relationships and surface quality, more about mood in the paintings than representing a time or object or specific referenced, something a little less tangible than an object or a space. So I kind of just went around with my materials and let them kind of speak to me. And process-oriented art was always more interesting. I think kept me more occupied in getting romanced by the tactile sensation of applying the paint and the way it smells and the way it feels going onto the surface and the textures that are created with different mediums. And it was more about the process than the result, although that's important because you don't want to just be making a mess on your surfaces. But abstraction was always really interesting to me, and I felt as if I could find my voice a little bit easier through just letting go and kind of working on impulse. So that's kind of how I got into the groove that I was in at that point in time.
How did it turn out?
Turned out pretty well. The show was successful. I did sell a few pieces from that.
Okay.
I tried to maintain a creative habit of painting when I moved back home from school, but I kind of neglected that a little bit. I ended up, getting a day job, and when you're trying to make progress with a body of work, you really need to make that your, in and out every day. You want to be eating and sleeping and thinking nothing but painting. But when you're working, like a normal day job, it kind of got in the way. So I didn't make the mess and leave it out in the studio, allowing me to kind of come back to things and keep the progress going. So I have not been painting nearly as much in these last few decades, sadly. But I do still have the all of my materials, and I do paint when I can, but more so now it's been watercolor on paper if I do get to paint. It's just a little bit more of an easier medium to kind of dabble in. I can have a little bit of fun with it and then pull back, and it's not a big deal. I don't have a whole room made into a mess with mineral spirits and rags and paints that won't dry. So
it can get messy. So you graduated, I'm guessing?
I did graduate. I graduated New Paltz in 2006, I want to say. Yeah, 2006. I did pretty well in school. I really enjoyed school. I kind of always have. So that was, it was bittersweet. If I could have stayed a student forever, I think I may have. I actually went back to school after graduating New Paltz. I worked for a couple years, and then I enrolled in SUNY Farmingdale for graphic design because that was around the time when the economy kind of took a nosedive, and I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to make it as a painter, because it's a very hard thing to do. So I went back to school for commercial art, thinking that would be my plan B. And that was rewarding too. And like I said, I liked school a lot. So it was a fun exercise in learning a whole new skill set and meeting new people and having a new set of goals. And I did graduate from Farmingdale, I guess if that was, I'm going to say 2010, maybe around there. My dates are all screwed up, but I got a bachelor's of technology from Farmingdale in graphic design, technically visual communications. But in that discipline, I ended up feeling like you kind of lost the romance of the art because it wasn't so much about personal expression, as it was about identifying a demographic and analyzing market data and creating presentations for firms and companies that want to try to manipulate a consumer. So it was a little bit too business heavy. So I kind of I am appreciative of the experience and the knowledge, but it was not really for me. So I luckily found tattooing as an outlet in between that Farmingdale time and working in the real world time. So
how did that come about, the tattoo world?
I had been kind of like a little shop brat for a couple years when I was, a senior in high school. I had accompanied one of my mom's friends to get her tattoo, and I met the artist, and it was pretty awesome to see someone that was able to support themselves and create their own art in such a counterculture type of way. I mean, it wasn't really about the rebellion so much as it was about the application of a craft that satisfied, the creative process, but then also was something special that you were giving to someone else. So I became friendly with this tattooer, and when I had gone away to college, I would stop back in at the shop once in a while when I was home for breaks, and just kind of built up that friendship and familiarity with the shop and the goings on there. And when I had graduated New Paltz and came back home, stopped back into that shop, and the tattooer had extended an offer to start an apprenticeship and see if it was something that I was into doing. And she knew that I had the chops artistically, and I guess it was just a matter of working out the technical application and learning the ins and outs of how a tattoo business works. So I started apprenticing in early 2010, and then in 2007 I started. Okay. And then I did my first tattoo in October of 2007. So it was a pretty decent apprenticeship in terms of its length. Some apprenticeships can be quite long, and some, it's really up to the mentor how long your apprenticeship lasts and how well you pick things up and things. So I started tattooing in October of 2007, and then by, I'd say, 2010, I was busy enough to pretty much rely on that as my sole source of income and a creative outlet, which was pretty cool.
I didn't even know there was such a thing as an apprenticeship for tattooing.
Oh yeah, that's the way that the old timers do it. They have these tattoo schools now, but there's a lot of criticism around them. Seeming like you can just sell this idea of anybody can be a tattooer, and that's not necessarily true. So selling these tuitions for $10,000 and 2 weeks time, and then boom, you're a tattooer. Not really the best way to kind of earn your stripes, but certainly these apprenticeships can be a kind of a hazing process too. So there's a wide spectrum of how people can get their way into tattooing, and but it's really a self-starting sort of thing. You have to want to be better with every piece you make, and you really need to be committed to drawing every day, because there really is no break. If you have clients coming, you need to be prepared for them. So it's pretty much homework preparing for, and if you're not doing homework and drawing, you're tattooing. So your apprenticeship does need to prepare you for a steady workflow and work ethic and technical application. It is a craft, so you need to hone that and be committed to it for it to work for you.
At this point now, did you get a tattoo on yourself before you apprenticed?
Yes, I was tattooed. I was tattooed underage, actually.
Oh.
But I knew that it was going to be something I was. When you connect with tattoos in the way that collectors do, as soon as you're tattooed that it's going to be something that's going to be a part of your life. So I had gotten tattooed around 16.
What was it?
And it was a piece of flash from an artist named David Bolt, who had done a bunch of like sci-fi illustrations. She's a little fairy. She's kind of like a dark fairy that's sitting in a lotus flower. And, 16-year-old me thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So now I wear it for life. But it was the beginning of a very fruitful, awesome part of my life. So I don't regret it.
How many tattoos do you have now on you?
Tattoos that I have collected, I think I stopped counting at 19.
Whoa.
Now it's kind of coverage percentage. So I have, a good set of sleeves here, and my legs are probably about half covered. But counting, I think I stopped at 19 or 20. So many.
And the first time you did your own tattoo on someone?
The very first time I put a needle to skin was October of 2007. And that was some artwork from a Melvins album. And that was on my boyfriend at the time. I believe we put it on his calf. So that was... Yeah, he was my first. I did pretty good. He was my first. But I did pretty well. Came out pretty decent from what I recall. It's been years since I've seen it. I'm sure there's things that I could do to improve upon it now. But, I took to it pretty quickly, thankfully. So.
No nerves?
Oh, there's definitely nerves.
Yeah.
Even still today, there's nerves. You should have nerves. If the second that you're tattooing without any sort of... if you don't have that nervous sort of energy, I feel like you kind of lose an edge a little bit. So, there were nerves then. There's nerves now. They're different nerves. They kind of operate differently for me, creatively and psychologically. But, but the nerves are always there.
What was the most difficult tattoo you've ever had to do on somebody?
The most difficult. Well, it's hard to really pinpoint a singular project that's the most difficult because each challenge presents a different set of hurdles to jump. Some things can be pretty straightforward in terms of design. But they can be on the part of the body that's very challenging to work on. Sometimes the texture of the person's skin creates its own set of challenges, and it's not even about the artwork. So, but I would say there was a photorealistic snake that I did on a friend of mine from middle school, and he had flown up from Georgia or one of the Carolinas, I can't remember. And he was coming up periodically throughout the summer to complete this project. And it was a snake that wrapped from his forearm all the way up his arm, over his shoulders, and down onto his chest on the other side of his body.
Whoa.
And the only part of that I stenciled was the head of the snake. And that was on the forearm there. Everything else was freehand. And I kind of... It was a wing and a prayer with that because I had never tried to freehand something and work it photorealistically before. So that was very challenging and very rewarding because it worked out very well. And it's one of my strongest pieces, I want to say, in terms of realism. But then there's a whole bunch of other things that are challenging when you have a wall of text to tattoo on someone, and there's, you're working with letter forms and layout and things that are a little bit more graphic, oriented. That can present a whole separate set of challenges too. So it's hard to say what the hardest one was. I'm sure I don't think I've had my hardest one yet.
What about the longest it took to apply a tattoo on somebody?
I would say, I have clients that have been tattooing for years that have nice collections that are probably upward of, 30 to 50 hours over time. The longest I've tattooed in one session, I'd say probably about 6 hours or so. After that, I get a little I get tired, I get antsy. There are tattooers that can tattoo for 10, 12 hours at a clip. That's fantastic to me. I don't think I could ever hang like that, though. I just get antsy.